Welcome back and thank you for joining us. This PowerPoint presentation and the accompanying narration were created for East Texas Baptist University for use in the course Criminal Justice 3314 Criminal Investigation, and I am Dr. Eric Hillman. The textbook in this class is Criminal Investigation, 11th edition, by Hess, Orthman, and Cho. This is Chapter 6D. Chapter 6 has been divided into smaller segments for easier online viewing, and this is the fourth segment of Chapter 6. The student's viewing of this presentation is designed to supplement the reading of the text and not simply to replace it. In the prior segment, we talked about interviews, specifically of victims and witnesses. Now we're going to change to the subject of interrogation, which is specifically done for suspects. Interrogations are more difficult than interviews. They're more difficult for several reasons. One is that in an interview of a victim or a witness, they usually want to cooperate. Suspects usually don't want to cooperate. You also have to be careful not to violate the suspect's constitutional rights. He has the right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment and right to counsel under both the Fifth and Sixth Amendments to the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment specifically says you cannot compel a statement in a criminal case. You can't force him to give a statement. We also know that Miranda versus Arizona was the U.S. Supreme Court case that mandated the police officers read what we now know as the Miranda rights to someone who is in custody and being interrogated. So custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. That's what I call the Miranda equation. Both have to be true. First of all, the suspect has to be in custody, and secondly, he has to be interrogated in order for it to be required that you read the Miranda rights. These are the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him or her present with you while you are being questioned. If you can't afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questioning if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. After reading the suspect his or her Miranda rights, you then ask the waiver. Do you understand each of these rights as I have explained them to you? Having these rights in mind, you now wish to talk to us. Generally, when you read the Miranda rights, you'll actually read them directly off a card or a piece of paper so that you don't forget to read any. Some seasoned investigators have them memorized and just recite them from heart, but I encourage you as a younger officer to read them off the paper. You then would have the suspect initial by each right saying that he read it and he understood it. And then the waiver. You ask him, do you waive these rights and agree to talk to me? According to the law, a waiver must be intelligent and knowing. He must know what he's waiving. He must be intelligent enough to understand it. Silence by itself is not a waiver. So if you read him his rights and he remains silent, that doesn't mean he's waiving his rights. If he does agree to waive his rights and talk to you, he can later invoke his rights. So he may at first say, yeah, I'll talk to you. And once your questioning gets a little bit uncomfortable for him, he can then say, well, I guess I want to talk to a lawyer. I want to remain silent. And yes, he can do that. He can change his mind. We already said the Miranda rights apply whenever the Miranda equation is true. Specifically, custody plus interrogation equals Miranda. So if both of those two things are not true, Miranda is not required. Miranda does not apply if he's not in custody. So if you're just talking to someone on the street You've not detained him. You're simply having a voluntary conversation. You don't have to read Miranda. Unsolicited statements. If someone comes up to you and makes a statement, then that statement would be admissible against him even though you didn't read Miranda. In lineups, people can be forced to participate in a lineup. If a suspect in a robbery or rape case is identified, you can force him to participate, be one of the 6 people in the lineup, and you do not have to read him his Miranda warnings for that. You can force someone to be fingerprinted without reading Miranda warnings. Miranda warnings are going to apply to oral, verbal statements, not to pictures and fingerprints. You can force someone to take a sobriety test without Miranda. When I say force, the reality is you can't force them to take it, but you can have them take it without reading them the Miranda warning. Minor traffic stops. If you stop someone for speeding and write them a ticket, you don't have to read Miranda, because for that minor traffic stop, the courts have deemed this person not to be in custody. Terry stops. That means you stop someone and frisk them solely for weapons, or you stop them and ask them questions. They're technically not in custody, even though they're being detained. They're not in custody, and you don't have to read Miranda. Probation and parole officers do not have to read Miranda warnings to people on probation or parole when they question them. Undercover officers posing as a cellmate. When you're an undercover officer, the person doesn't know you're an officer, therefore the intimidation value of being an officer is not present. So undercover officers do not have to read Miranda before they question someone. And questioning by private citizens. So if your mother questions you about the marijuana that she found in your desk drawer in your room, and then your mother turns it over to the police, since your mother is not a government agent, whatever you told your mother would be admissible if she chooses to reveal it to the police. So what if a suspect invokes his right to counsel? Officer, I don't want to talk to you until I talk to my attorney first. Well, then you can't talk to him until he gets counsel. What if he says, I don't want to talk to you, officer, until I talk to my attorney? So you said, okay, you can leave, and he leaves. And then 3 weeks later, you ask him questions again. This time he confesses to the crime. Is that admissible? Yes, because your invocation of right to counsel expires 14 days if the person's not in custody. Now, if you questioned him while he's in prison, and then 3 weeks later you question him again, since he's still in custody, he still has invoked his right to counsel. What if he says something ambiguous or unclear, like, well, I don't know if I should answer your questions, officer. Maybe I should get a lawyer. Well, you're not required to resolve that request. You don't have to say, okay, are you or are you not asking for a lawyer? If it's ambiguous, you can keep asking questions. What does it mean by beachheading? This is an improper interrogation technique. If you have a suspect in custody, you're required to read Miranda warnings before interrogation. So what if someone's in custody and the officer does ask questions without Miranda warning? Well, those questions would not be admissible in court. So the suspect confesses to a crime, but that confession is not admissible. But what if the officer then, after the suspect confesses, say, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to read you your Miranda warning, and you agree to waive that warning, right? Yeah. Okay, now I need to ask you the same question again. Did you kill her? Yes, I did. Is either of those statements admissible? We know the first statement's not admissible because the officer questioned the suspect without reading Miranda, and the suspect was in custody. Can he then, after the illegal action, can he make it right by then reading Miranda and asking him the question again? And the answer is no. The Supreme Court has said that's called beachheading. You cannot illegally get a confession and then try to make it right by reading Miranda afterwards and re-asking the question. So neither statement would be admissible in court. If you arrest someone who is a citizen of a foreign country, and in a cosmopolitan city like Houston or Dallas, you'll have people from all countries of the world. But here in Texas, most people that we arrest who are citizens of a foreign country are from Mexico. The 1963 Vienna Convention Treaty says that if someone is arrested here in the United States, they have a right to contact the consulate of their own country if they're either detained or arrested. So there's only one embassy for each country, and almost all of those are in Washington, D.C. But some major cities have consulates. And for instance, Houston has a consulate for Mexico, even though the Mexican embassy is in Washington, D.C. And someone from Mexico has a right to contact their consulate if they're detained or arrested. So what if someone claims diplomatic immunity? That means they're actually a diplomat, not just a citizen in another country, but actually a diplomat in another country. Well, first of all, they should have a diplomat ID that states exactly that. Secondly, the police department that you work for will have a mechanism for the dispatcher or someone in the police department to contact the United States State Department Bureau of Diplomatic Security, and they will have a list of every person who has diplomatic immunity and therefore would be immune from prosecution. What about the time and place of interrogation? Well, you want to do it as soon as possible after the crime, because the longer you wait, the longer he has a chance to make up an alibi or a lie that makes sense. When you interrogate a suspect, you want it to be in a place that's unfamiliar to the suspect. It's good for the suspect to be not at ease. That is completely different from an interview of a victim or witness. A victim or witness, you want them to be at ease so they will cooperate with you. But a little bit of stress is good for an interrogation. You want the suspect to be away from friends or family. Either one of these may encourage him not to cooperate. You want to be free from interruptions. You definitely don't want him answering his cell phone and staying on the cell phone during the middle of interrogation. So take away all opportunities for interruptions. The police station is ideal. You're on your home ground, your home field advantage, and this in most cases is unfamiliar to the suspect. If he won't go to the police station, then you can use your police car. Something where you're on your own territory. Even if inside a police car, you're on your own territory. You generally do not want to use the suspect's home for interrogation unless that's absolutely the only thing you could do. That should be used as a last resort. There's too many opportunities for him to weasel out of the interrogation when he's at home. Generally speaking, when you have an interrogation, it's only the suspect and the interrogator. Sometimes the second interrogator's there, but you don't want any of his friends there or family members there encouraging him not to cooperate. If he requests an attorney, of course, he has a right to have one. And if he requests an attorney, then you either have to stop the interrogation until he gets an attorney, or you could invite the attorney into the room. Generally speaking, you won't have the issue of the attorney being present in the room, because usually if he asks for an attorney and speaks to one, the attorney will tell him not to cooperate at all. If possible, this interrogation needs to be video or audio recorded. This is so standard now that most departments are going to video and audio record all interrogations of suspects. No phone calls, no distractions, no phone in the room. The officer's phone should be off or on silent, and you should tell the suspect to turn his phone off. The interrogation room, should it look nice and comfortable like this? Well, detectives' opinions differ. One option is to have a comfortable looking room with comfortable furniture, nice decorations, maybe some background music. It's generally felt like if this is someone who's not had a lot of exposure to the criminal justice system, that relaxing him may allow for more cooperation, encourage conversation and rapport. That would only be in situations when you have a novice criminal that you're talking to. Option 2 would be a very stark setting. A chair and 2 tables, nothing else. No pictures to distract. No large desk. You want a small desk because you want to be sitting fairly close to him so you can monitor his behavior and his expressions. Also, a large desk will allow him to hide some of his behaviors with his hands or his feet under the desk. The suspect feels more uncomfortable and more vulnerable, and generally speaking, this is what you want. When you start the interrogation, even before you bring the suspect in the room, you're going to start the camera, and then you'll bring him in the room and actually leave him alone for a while. Why are you leaving him alone for a while? First of all, he may try to hide something in the room. The picture on the right is about a suspect in an interrogation room. He's got drugs in his pocket. He's afraid that they're going to discover that. And so he puts a chair on the desk and he reaches up and he puts the drugs in the ceiling panel, above the ceiling panel, thinking that no one saw him, not realizing the camera was already rolling. So you may be able to get evidence from him that way. Also, when you make him wait for a while, he gets apprehensive, and the more time that passes, the more nervous he gets, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to figure out what he's going to be asked, trying to figure out if the police will believe his lies. And you want to build some of that nervousness. Let his anxiety build. When you start the interrogation, you want to enter the room with a professional presence. You want to act professionally, you want to be confident, you want to be in charge, but you don't want to be arrogant, because arrogance can turn someone off. You want him, at least at this point, to respect you. Then you have to select your interrogation technique. Again, detectives differ on this. Some detectives choose to decrease anxiety and be friendly. That, if it's done, is usually only done in the beginning of the interview, and it's usually only done with suspects who do not have a lot of experience with the criminal justice system. Interrogation technique 2 would be to increase anxiety with authoritarianism. This is often done with suspects who have a lot of exposure to the criminal justice system. They've been arrested many times, and they're not going to be fooled by your fake nice cop routine. You introduce yourself, and you're keeping in mind that you have 2 performances going here. One for the suspect, and number 2 for the jury. The suspect's watching it today, but the jury will be watching it if this goes to trial, and that could be months or even years from now. You show your ID, identify yourself, and you state the purpose of the interrogation. Now, you're not, at this point, telling them everything you know. You're just giving the general purpose. We're talking with John Smith today about the burglary that happened at the storage unit last Friday night on Highway 7. You're going to read the Miranda warnings, and you always want to read the Miranda warnings while the video is going, so that's proof to the jury that you did read the warnings, so you can't later say that you didn't read them. At the beginning of the interview, you don't want to violate his personal space, so you stay at least 2 to 6 feet away. In this particular case, the officer is the width of a table away. The table looks like it's about 4 feet, and there's an additional foot between them on each side, so he's about 6 feet away, face to face. You always look for nonverbal as well as verbal communication. What he says verbally is important, but what he does nonverbally is also important. Don't overlook things, like here in this picture, he's got his arms crossed. That's a sign of being defensive. I've heard different figures. In one point in our textbook, the author says that communication is 10% verbal, 90% nonverbal. I've also heard 1/3 verbal, 2/3 nonverbal. Bottom line is there's a lot of information you can gain from nonverbal body language. Some things that the suspect does may indicate deception. First of all, looking down. If he won't look you in the eye, that's something you realize even in childhood. If you ask a child a question, they're lying to you, they'll usually look at the ground when they respond. Rolling the eyes upward, like the lady in the bottom left picture. These sometimes indicate deception. Hands over the mouth or eyes. It could be a subconscious way of protecting themselves. It could be that when someone coughs, do they really have a cough, or are they just buying time? If they don't cough until after you ask the question, that may be an indication that they're buying a few extra seconds to figure out their answer. Rubbing hands around the mouth, like the picture in the bottom center, the lady with her hands around her mouth, sometimes indicates deception. Continual licking of the lips, sometimes lips twitching, definitely indicate nervousness, may also indicate deception. Now, that's not proof in court they're lying to you, but when you see these signs with some questions and not others, then you may realize you need to do more follow-up on the questions where you have nonverbal indications of deception. And again, check the timing of their coughs. Is it intermittent? Is it only right after you ask a question? Other signs of deception: rapid breathing, a change in face color. People often can't hide their emotions when they're manifest in physical changes to their body. Pulsating neck artery, continuous swallowing, tapping fingers on the table, excessive protestations of innocence. What do we mean by that? Not just, I didn't do it, but, well, to be perfectly honest, and I don't want to lie to you, whenever you have wordy denials, that's often a sign of lying. Or, I swear on my father's grave. These are indications that he's trying to shore up his story to make you believe it, and he realizes he needs some kind of additional force behind his story to make it believable. A lot of your approach will depend on the suspect's criminal history. If this is a first-time offender, he might respond better to friendly rapport. So he's already scared. He may even be so scared that all he knows is what his friend told him. Just ask for a lawyer. So by you being friendly, you may put him at ease enough that he will cooperate with you. However, if someone has a lengthy criminal history, maybe they're an ex-con, been in prison a few times, already hardened, they're not going to be intimidated by a police officer asking questions, or they're not going to be fooled by it. So maybe just authoritative approach. Hey, here's the evidence we have. This is what we got. This is what you're looking at. One way to establish rapport with a suspect is to develop empathy. So what's happening in this picture? Man comes home from work. He's not due home till 5, but he decides to come home for lunch. Finds his wife in bed with another man. Then what? He shoots them both? Now he's charged with murder. What was his motive for the crimes? That's called sudden passion. This man normally would not shoot and kill someone. He's not a murderer. But because of sudden passion, this sudden anger that came up, he did it. Perhaps someone shot someone out of panic or fear. Perhaps someone stole and became a thief because there's a financial hardship. They lost their job. They couldn't make their house payment. They couldn't do whatever. And so what you want to do is you want to develop empathy for these things. Man, I read the report. I can't believe your best friend would do that to you by going to bed with your wife. That's just unbelievable. That's just not right. You know, a lot of people would have done what you did. Panic or fear, I understand that you were afraid. I might have been afraid in that same situation. Well, you're not a thief normally, but with losing your job and not being able to make your house payment, I understand that put a lot of pressure on you to provide for your family, and you might have done things that you normally wouldn't do. You're developing empathy. You then talk about the necessity of the crime. What do I mean by that? Well, here's a shoplifter. She's already done the cost-benefit analysis in her mind. She's already said, yes, I might get caught, but chances are pretty low. I don't see any cameras around here. Chances of me being caught are pretty low. And she sticks something in her purse. So maybe she thinks it's necessary. Well, for a candy bar, probably not, but almost anything else. You can say, you know what, you needed that item. Everyone needs that item. I mean, here we are in the coronavirus with the toilet paper shortage. What if someone steals toilet paper? You needed that. That was a necessity. You can't get by without it. Anybody else would have done that too. It's a big corporation. They can afford it. Walmart, multi-millionaire, million-dollar corporation, probably billion-dollar corporation. Surely they can afford to lose us, the $149 TV set. They probably don't even notice it's missing until they do their inventory at the end of the year. Agree with her. Agree with him. It's a big corporation. It's not really a big deal with them. You're developing empathy. You're saying, hey, I understand how you feel, and what you're saying makes sense. A lot of people do it. It's not a big deal. People do this all the time. You're not worse than all these other people. Shoot, there's a lot of people out there that haven't got caught. As a matter of fact, it's really unfair that you were the only one that was caught. The video shows that you came in with 4 girls. And when the security guard confronted you, everyone ran away, and the security guard just happened to catch you. That's not fair. That's not fair when everyone's doing it and you're the only one that gets caught. So that makes her think that you see her as a victim rather than as a perpetrator. So she may be more likely to share with you. And secondly, she might think to herself, well, you're right, it isn't fair. As a matter of fact, my other friend stole something even more expensive than me. She may even convince her to give up the names of the other people who were part of the theft ring. The suspect sometimes feel guilty for their crimes. So what do? You say, I've done some good things in my life and I've done some stupid things. You've done some good things in your life and you've done some stupid things. And what I've found is my own guilt when I do stupid things is worse than anything anyone else could put on me. And the best way just is to start with a clean conscience. That's the best way to start over. Just admit what I did wrong, confess it to whoever I hurt, and apologize and make it right. And by the way, courts understand the same thing. The courts understand that people aren't perfect, people make mistakes, but the court has to decide how they're going to handle your case. And courts are easier on those who cooperate and confess what they did, or cooperate and make things right if they've hurt someone. Now, you don't want to make promises. You can't say, if you don't confess, you probably get jail or prison time. If you do confess, you probably get probation. You can't make any kind of promises like that, because it's not the police decision, it's the court's decision what to do with this person. If it's a serious crime, well, people are visual. It's easy to deny it to the police because some of their friends have already asked them about it and they've denied it to their friends, and their friends have believed them. because the friends don't have all the evidence the police have, and the friends want to believe that their friend is telling the truth. But when you start showing hard evidence, we've got the gun, we've got your fingerprints on the gun, we have the victim's DNA, little droplets of blood on the gun. You show them the hard evidence and they see it, then they're more likely to realize, hey, they got me. You also want to show the suspect that the possible consequences are very severe. If this is a first-degree felony, that means they're looking at 5 to 99 or life. And you want to stick with the big numbers. Hey, you're looking at up to 99 years in prison. Hey, you could do life in prison for this. Those are the big numbers. They see the hard evidence, they hear the big numbers, they get really scared. And you say, you're right. You have a right to be scared because we've got the evidence to convict you. And so now you got to choose the lesser of two evils. Do you want to keep lying and telling people that you didn't do it, and then we take you to trial and then we prove you did and you get 99 years or life? Or do you want to cooperate with us? Because the courts often, you can't say they will be with this suspect, but the courts often are easier on those who cooperate. You know, looking at 5 to 99, maybe someone who cooperates is more likely to only get 5 years. Shoot, you could be out on parole in 18 months. You got no priors? Well, I mean, it's up to the court, but one option they could give you is probation. So you want to, when the court's trying to decide what to give you, whether it's 99 years or life, or only 5 years, or only probation, when you approach the court with that lesser of two evils, do you want them to think that you are still denying everything you did wrong, or do you want them to think that you're sorry for what you did and you'll never do it again? Well, if you are sorry for what you did, then let's come clean right now. But again, don't make promises, because if you promise a certain sentence and they confess, then that would be considered coercion. The suspect is often embarrassed from what they have done. They're afraid their family, their friends, their church members are going to look down on them or hate them for the crime they committed. You know what? Family and friends, they'll forgive, but people don't want to forgive someone who won't even admit they're wrong. But if you admit you made a mistake, you apologize, you go straight, you turn your life around, then people will be more likely to forgive you, especially family and friends. And that's the end of Chapter 6D. Once you've viewed this presentation and taken notes, I encourage you to continue on with Chapter 6E. Thanks and have a great day.